Well, I try to tell the new EMTs that are clearly using EMS as a stepping stone. Like, if your end goal is doctor, PA, whatever, don't go to paramedic school. Go to paramedic school because you want to be a paramedic. If you want to go practice as a paramedic, even if that's just for 5-10 years, that's fine if you want to be a paramedic. But if your end goal is something else, skip paramedic school, because most of medicine can't tell you the difference between an EMT and a paramedic. PA school had no idea. Medical school sees it as the same. They really can't tell you the difference despite the enormous increase in education as a paramedic. So I tried to tell them that. And I wouldn't trade my path for anything. Like, I loved my time as a paramedic. I was in EMS specifically for about a decade. And, I think if your end goal is something beyond paramedic, then don't go to paramedic school. Like, it's a huge investment to just do it for 2 years and then quit.
No, that's always my response, right? Everybody. You ever thought about being a nurse? No. You ever thought about being a doctor? No. You ever want to be a firefighter? No. And they just look at me and I go, I wanted to be a paramedic. It's like since I was 5.
Yeah.
I didn't say I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a paramedic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gage and DeSoto.
Yeah,
I wanted to, but that was my time frame, right? And I didn't want to be any of those things. I wanted to be a paramedic. Mm-hmm. And they don't understand it though. They look at me like why and this is what I notice now is the first words out of this generation's mouth is, but they don't pay anything. I'm not doing it for the pay. I'm doing it because I love it, and this is what I've always wanted to do. There's nothing better. There is no better feeling in the world than to deliver someone's child and hand it to them. There's no better feeling.
Eddie,
what?
I know how you are with delivering babies.
It's not my favorite thing, but it still feels good to do it. I might gag and make noises while I'm doing it, but the heart of and the joy of being able to do it is there.
What are you going to do? Have this out here on I-25? What are you going to name it? Mile marker 138?
But you know what? It worked. I told her
she didn't deliver.
That's just a rule, ma'am. I don't make the rules. Don't be mad at me for that.
Man, one of the funniest stories I've ever. Oh my gosh. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I will say that being a paramedic puts you in the most unique opportunities where you can actually do something like that. Like in the ER, we don't get that. These things are happening in the patient's homes. These things are happening where you're right across the street from a real emergency, where you actually get to do something that genuinely saves someone's life. And there's not that opportunity in most of medicine. In the ER, it comes, but not nearly with the frequency, because you might be in the right place at the right time to shock somebody out of VTAC right back to life,
Correct.
Minutes
Correct.
after they coded. And if you had been 15 minutes away, it would have been a completely different outcome.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where the ER is. They're not going to get into the ER in 15 minutes after that. It's their family's not driving them in, getting them in there within minutes. That's the ambulance getting to the scene, getting into their home and doing that. It puts you in an extremely unique situation to actually save somebody's life. When we all think about saving people's lives, we know we don't do it very often. It happens super infrequently. You can maybe you guys can think of more, but I can think of 5 times where I think I actually saved someone's life. But it's when you get there and you can shock them quickly
But it's a drug.
Yeah.
It's a drug. It's so addictive.
It is.
And there's a medic that used to work here, Dutch. He said one of the coolest things. He said that he got into EMS, and he goes, he said it was the coolest thing where I could actually turn somebody's life around in the period of 5 minutes. He goes, completely change their life in 5 minutes. Well, you can change it for good or you can change it for bad, but he goes, that's one of the best things about EMS. And it's also one of the worst things about EMS because that's what keeps, I think that's what keeps some of the people in it, because they're going after that next taste, that next rush, that next, and it's few and far between, and Eddie and I've had this discussion, talking about taking, Joe Blow that we take 4 times a day, 5 or 6 times a week, and and just they're self-destructive, and it's hard to take care of people like that. We had this discussion when Nick was sick, and and how it was really hard. It was really hard for Eddie, when my son was sick, and I'm going to tell a story. about you. So, and this is one of the things. And, when Nick was sick, Eddie was with me when I found out. He sat with me all night long while Tracy was making arrangements for us to get from Mexico back to Colorado because we didn't think he was going to live through, over the next couple of days. And so while that was all taking place, Eddie stuck by my side and never left me. So I love you for that, by the way. And then when we got back, Nick, we thought he was going to be okay. And it turned out he didn't. And right before he died, he had cancer. Right before he died, Eddie had not been able to come see him. He couldn't bring himself to come see him because it hurt him so much in his heart. And finally one day he decided to come see him. And he went and walked into Nick's room. And next thing you know, Eddie comes running out. And my first wife said, "Hey, Eddie just left here and he's really upset." And I went and found him. And tears just streaming down his eyes. And I said, "What's wrong, Eddie?" And he goes, "I just took so-and-so. It was a patient that we knew." He goes, "I've taken him." And he goes, "All he wants to do is die. All he wants to do is drink himself to death. All he wants to do is, whatever, drugs." He goes, "And we take him all the time and we help him all the time." And he goes, "And there's this beautiful boy in there just trying to live. Just trying to live." And so I knew at that point in time that Eddie was my soulmate because that's how I feel. We take care of all these people. And I told Eddie, I don't know if you remember this, but I said, you take care of 1 or 2 or 300 people like that, and then you get the chance to take care of somebody like Nick. And I said, it makes all of that worth it. I said that you pay for that.
It really does.
By that.
But that's what makes the business tough because, again, those calls are few far in between. You know what I mean? And that's what makes it hard. 98% of the calls you are running are people that don't appreciate you, have no business taking an ambulance, and think that you're their ambulance driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't have no idea about your education, how well educated you are, how many certs are in your pocket, the time and amount and effort you spent away from your family to do all that. Mm-hmm. And so, that part I could get over, but that's the part that still eats me today. That's the part that I live with, right? I took, for me, and I don't know about you, Aaron, if it affected you like that, but for me, I took those calls. Every call was personal. It was like me fighting Satan. If I went to an arrest, I was like, not today, player, not today. This is mine. I'm winning this one. Yeah. And I would work. And I get to the ER and they'd call it and I just start crying.
Yeah.
I did all that work. That's not fair. This is a good dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then I go and shock, Tony the Tiger, the homeless guy, and he comes right back. Yeah. And you're like, come on, man. Like, now I pick him up 3 weeks later for the same stuff again,
Yeah.
Well, we say it all the time, like, that patient in room whatever, he's just riddled with cancer, didn't know he had it. Well, he's a really nice guy, of course. Of course he's got the horrible diagnosis. He's a super nice human being, and that's probably our cynicism, the jadedness that we get. Lori, it comes to mind this thing that Lori, I had her on the podcast recently, and she said that even the drunk that's just puked all over my shoes and has been treating me like shit all day is made in the image of God.
Yeah, you're right.
And I was like,
absolutely.
Boy, I could use that perspective probably more often, but
yeah, I mean that should probably be quotes in the back of an ambulance to help people.
Because it's hard. It's hard to deal with the humanity that we have to deal with day in and day out. The people that treat you like shit, the people that call over and over again for non-emergent stuff, use you like a taxi. I mean that stuff burns you out too.
It does. Burns you out more, I think.
Yeah.
I used to go home and be mad at myself when you get that one and. 3 or 4 times in a week, you've had a rough night, you've had some bad calls, you're trying to do reports, you got to go pick him up again, and he wants to be mouthy, and you just have that one-on-one moment with them, and then I would later think about it and go, man, you're so better than that. That's not even the reason why you got in this business. Yeah. Like, you can't, if that's what you're going to be, if that's, that anger that you have on somebody, like you said, that is a human being. It may be an annoyance, but that is part of the job too. used to beat myself up for that. I would be so angry that I let myself get to that point with them, you know. And it used to really bug me a long time. And then I just started learning that, you know what, it's a lot easier to just play back instead of being angry. Have fun with it. That's where some of my antics came from, though. It was my way of trying to not.
It's a special phone.
Yeah, you know, trying not to let it get to me to the point where I had to get to that point. You know what I mean? Because you won't survive like that.
No, it's not worth your emotional reaction. It's not worth taking that home with you because you regret how you treated somebody. And it's how your patient interaction with them and you is much more about who you are as a person as opposed to them. You know, we're always going to have the people that treat us terribly. It's emergency medicine. We're dealing with people on their worst day or their perceived worst day, and they're on drugs and alcohol, and, you know, we're always going to get treated terribly periodically, but it's much more about who we are than they are, you know, and to rise above it, which it takes a lot of not rising above it, I think, to learn to actually handle those situations.
I agree. I think Tracy has said this, and it's one of the coolest things that and we've got video of it. She said, we have the privilege of taking care of people on their worst days. The privilege of doing it. And I thought, and when she said that, I'd been doing this for a long time. And when she said that and I saw the video, it was like somebody hit me right here with a ball peen hammer and said, yeah, it really is a privilege for us to be able to do that. And, you know, I should probably treat my patients a little better, you know, so anyway.
You know, when people ask me what's the one thing I've learned the most about, or what did paramedicine do for me, that's the one thing. And if I'm being truthfully honest, I didn't find out how immature I really was until I got into a professional business. That's the honest to God truth. That's the one thing it taught me, is how immature I was as a person, as a civilian, as a newbie, as a rookie, as limited education as much, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't realize really how immature I really was mentally, emotionally, you know what I mean? Until I got into being in the EMS and realized, man, bro, I got some growing up to do really fast. You know,
well,
and I'm blessed for that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm blessed for that.
I'm glad you realize that, because there's some people that don't realize it, and they go all through their career like that.
Yeah.
We know them all. We know every one of those. You could point them out.
Well, one of the like standards I have in emergency medicine is that you're always going to have to deal with a Karen. There's Karens out there everywhere. They're checking into the ER. They're calling 911, and their number one goal is to get under your skin, make you feel like shit, make you feel like a terrible provider. And if you only let her win, if you get an emotional reaction out of yourself. If you rise above it and treat her respectfully, take her complaint seriously, get her vital signs, take her to the hospital, you win. And she doesn't get to win if she doesn't get under your skin. But there's male Karens and there's female Karens out there that are always trying to get you to feel
it's
like
really
shit.
hard. Yeah. It's really hard to do that.
Absolutely. I think if there's in this business, I don't think there's a paramedic out there or an EMT out there that can't say that they haven't at some point had to have that happen. And I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but just the exhaustion, the stress level, the 4 days a week, running extra calls, staying 2 hours over, you know, day in and day out. I think sometimes it doesn't matter what call you have. Yeah. You know, it's just not the day.
Yeah.
But I think that was my biggest problem, is being immature. I didn't recognize it soon enough. And I did have some of those issues where I learned back and I look back on it. And so that's the immaturity side of you being in a professional business.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I had those partners that gave me some of those bad habits. I would see, you know, these paramedics that I respected giving it right back to the patient. You know, whether they're drunk or on meth or whatever, they give it right back to the patient. They're arguing with them. They're fighting with them in the back. And maybe it makes you feel good in the moment to give it right back to them. But at the end of the day, after the call, you're kind of like, I'm better than that, you know, and they deserve my respect, even if they, you know, aren't somebody that has earned it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're right.
What are some differences going from field medicine to the ER that you've noticed, for better or for worse?
I'm very illiterate with labs. Their meanings. I mean, the medicine part of it is it's standard, right? I mean, I am as I am. That doesn't change whether you're on a bus or so that kind of stuff. But for me, really, it's just lab values and how much meaning they really have, and just that kind of stuff. It's the assessment, all that is a little bit frustrating for me because I don't get to really do much of those.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to, like, I always take my stethoscope, and if it's a diff breathe or whatever, I try to go in and listen. And it's not to do that job for my provider or anybody. It's more just to come trying to keep my skills up.
Yeah.
I just haven't heard lung sounds in so long but I know now if I know my place, and my place is not on an ambulance anymore. So I feel comfortable that, I don't have to worry about, passing a lung sound test anytime soon because I'm not planning on being a truck. But I still would like to have it for me.
Sure.
But that's the hardest part, is that stuff. It's more of just understanding the lab values, the importance of it, and then not being able to do all the things the freedoms that I had being a paramedic versus being under the watchful eye of doctors.
Yeah.
Well, your affect in the ER is really good. I mean, it seems like when I see you are acting extroverted. You have a smile on your face. I see how you interact with patients. When you're just walking them back to the room, you're talking to them like a real human being. And it seems like, at least from my perspective, that you enjoy it and that you're good at it. And I think that paramedics in the ER is a weird new kind of thing that's actively getting figured out. And so I like it when I see people that are thriving in that role. At our other hospital too, I feel like the paramedics in that role are doing really well, and they've found kind of that weird position for a paramedic to be in and been better for it. Whereas a lot of people really struggle in that role and don't do well in it. So I think that's interesting.
I think that the only part that I appreciate that you mentioned that I really noticed for myself is I always try to introduce myself to the patient, because I was told a long time ago, learning in this business, I was a young EMT who thought he knew everything, and I had somebody pull me aside and tell me, you know what, man, if you just treat them like they're human beings and just introduce yourself and be a human and not be a robot and OPQRST, you know what I mean? We get caught in that hole because that's how we're learning. They're like, just be you, man. Introduce yourself. Make yourself human. You're going to get a lot more people willing to tell you what's wrong. And if you come in and you're just like, all right, so what's the deal? Why are you hurting today?
Yeah.
And I've watched other senior medics above me that I idolize and learn from do that. Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Casey, ma'am. How you doing? What's going on today? And you watch and you're like, And so I just started doing it, and it made a world of difference. Yeah. It made a world of difference in just their attitude approaching me.
Well, they're not going to trust you, I think, until they understand that you actually care about them. They're not going to trust whatever we have to tell them. When the whole workup's done and I go in to discharge somebody, if I haven't built some rapport or made them feel understood or cared for to some degree, or limited degree that we can in the ER, they're not really going to care about whatever plan I've come up with for whatever their complaint was, because there's no trust there, and we have a very limited time to build that trust, and treating them like a human being is how to do it.
I agree. I think it needs to be spread wider. There are a lot of people that do it, but I think it's something that we lack. I've seen it in the hospital too, just that lack of between physicians, not being able to do it. And a lot of it is volume. And then a lot of it is, not just volume, but the amount they have, the ratio that they're seeing as well, that they just don't have time.
Yeah.
And it's I agree. I think it's just one of the most humane things we can do, that's so simple and soft and easy, that will go so far on how they approach you next and their next tone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really weird, but it's such a simple thing that it almost seems sad to say we don't have time to do it.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be something that's time consuming, is what I've realized at the provider level. Is you can still sit down at the bedside. You can look them in the eye, give them a chance to talk. I think they say that the average doctor interrupts like after 9 seconds. It's something ridiculous. They interrupt after 9 seconds of letting the patient talk. But if you give them a little bit more time uninterrupted to give you the reason they're there, you can actually figure out that maybe their actual concern is not what their chief complaint is. Maybe they're worried they're having a stroke and their chief complaint is arm pain. We all know that's not a stroke, but they think it's a stroke, and you can cut that off at the very beginning of the visit and be like, this isn't a stroke. We're not even going to work you up for a stroke, instead of waiting till the end of the visit and being like, oh, your chest pain workup looks great. You're not having a heart attack. And they're like, well, what about the stroke I thought I was having? And then you got to start completely over and be like, you could have cut that off at the very beginning and be like, these aren't symptoms of a stroke. You're not having a stroke. I'm not worried about a stroke. You can spend the next hour sitting in this room as we work you up for a chest pain complaint and, be reassured that you're not having a stroke, So I think, and you don't have to spend a ton of time to do it, to look a patient in the eye, not just stand there with your arms crossed. And, it doesn't take a ton of time because we just don't have it, but you can still make them feel cared for and understood, I think.
I agree with you. I am starting to see it more than I have in previous, but it's still something I think that we lack. There are people that do it that I notice that do it, and I'm greatly appreciative that they do, because I try to do that every single patient.
Yeah.
I introduce myself every time the same way. And it's literally just part of my repertoire.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, man, I get so much more done, and they're so willing to work with you and cooperate because they know your name.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, hey nurse, it's, Eddie, do you mind getting me a cup of ice water? No, ma'am, not at all. Versus, you know what I mean?
And part of that's probably,
and I think it just means more to them that they can call somebody by their name.
100%. And I think part of it's your experience too, is how to talk to a patient, because you're not in your head about, I need to get their vital signs, I need to enter this into the computer, I need to do that, and then I need to do that. It's all on autopilot. You're going to do all that stuff without even thinking because you've done it so many times. You can actually spend that extra brain power on treating them like a human being. I mean, you think back to when we're new EMTs, I'm like, it took all my brain power to get a set of vital signs, and then start an IV. Everyone shut the hell up.
Right.
I'm going to get my stuff set out here. I'm going to clean the spot, clean it again.
I said no talking.
Yeah, you got to focus fully. You tell the patient to shut up. Don't move your arm. You don't let your partner move the ambulance yet.
I know, isn't it crazy back then, though, how big that was for us?
Oh, yeah, it was huge.
I was like, I'm getting my IV, sir,
And it took all your brain power. And then eventually you're starting IV, talking to them. You're looking ahead to see how close you are to the hospital. You're typing your report while you're doing it. I mean, you can do everything. You can do a lot of things like that on autopilot and actually remember why you're doing the job. And it's to, touch another human's life, and you can quit just getting in your head about the silly tasks.
I think you've seen it because I've seen you go in and out of rooms too, that sometimes, man, some of these people I think are just, I try to do a lot of my stuff with comedic sense to it. I try to make them smile a little bit, make them giggle. And I just feel like, you know what I mean? Like it's been proven, it's scientifically proven that is so healthy for you and helps trigger the chemical balance of what you need, when you're like that. And so when they're frustrated, I try to do and say funny things to get them to.
Well, I think the studies would support that alleviates pain. It improves their symptoms without giving them any medicine or doing any intervention. I read a study the other day that said something to the effect of like, if you actually listen to a patient long enough and let them say everything they wanted to say, their pain scale goes down. Their pain's actually better if you make them feel understood. And it's the same thing. You make them laugh. I bet studies would show that their pain scale goes down a little bit.
It was not a big deal, but it was in one of our rehab hospital here locally, and I was really kind of sad because, I joke with all the people that are in there, all the workers, joke with them. I said, what did you do to this patient, to make him sick? I mean, because they called us, and I said, because they were fine when they got here, and now what did you do to them? And they thought that was hilarious,
Yeah.
and it breaks the ice, and when it came time to move that patient, we had everybody in there because they just wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And one of the gals said, we really like you.
Yeah.
We wish you would come on all the calls. And I said, do you not get treated like this? And she goes, no, that actually there's some of the crews that are really, really pretty bad. And I said, well, you should complain about them.
Some of that, I think it's experience too. I mean, your ability to read the room, because you have to be able to read the room. To know when you can make a joke and it's going to be well received. You have to have that subconscious ability to read the patient, read the room, because those patients where you're like, this ain't gonna go over well. But the patients where you're like, I think I can make this patient laugh a little bit, and that's an experience thing. You have to see a lot of patients and be in a lot of rooms to accurately read. those patients that
Yeah.
you can make feel better in that way, I think.
And-
It's interesting to note that you're not really an extrovert, I think, too, because I feel the very same way. Like, when I'm on shift, though, I got to psych myself up and be like, I'm going to talk to a lot of people today.
You're not an extrovert.
No.
You're an introvert.
100%.
And I've known that since I've known you, since I first knew you. But you put yourself out there. Tracy's like that. She's had to learn how to do that because she's a total introvert, and you're
I'm something.
You're an anomaly.
I wouldn't guess that you're not an extrovert, but I think
Yeah.
those of us that would rather sit at home,
Yeah.
which is what I prefer to do, I think, a busy shift takes a lot more out of you in a lot of ways, because you have to talk to 1,000 human beings.
Yeah.
You're interacting with a ton of people. You need to be tactful in the things you say, and also be personable. And that's just not really that's not what I thrive in. I don't want to go and talk to 1,000 people. I would never choose to do that. So I got to psych myself up a little bit for it. And then it takes a little more out of me, at the end of the day. I want to sit the next day. I want to sit at home and not talk to a whole lot of people.
Well, I'm an extrovert. Don't know if you knew that. I really am. I love being around people, but only to a point, and then I'm done, and I want to be at home, and I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be with my dogs, want to be with my kids, whatever, but I don't want to have friends over necessarily.
Right.
I don't want to go to anybody else's place. Here's an exception, but I'll come here anytime because I love doing this. But I don't know. Maybe it's selective. I don't know.
I mean, I think everyone probably is a little bit of a mix, right? I don't think everybody fits perfectly in introvert or extrovert.
I like having alone time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't mean that in a naughty way.
It started for me actually after probably about, I'd say maybe my first 3 years on the bus. I started going, man, I don't want to go to somebody's house. I was just in 15 houses today, you know what I mean?
Right.
And out of the 15, 8 of them were filthy.
Yeah.
I don't want to. And so it got to the point where I'm just going to stay home. And then hey, come out with us, and I'm like, nah. I was in somebody's house today. I'm just going to stay home, And now it's grown to where I get off and I will spend 4 days in pajamas. I won't even come out of pajamas, bro. I
prefer not to have
I
to
will
put
go out
pants
to the
on.
car in pajamas just to prove that I'm not going nowhere. It's really gotten I get off work and I don't leave my house.
I wonder if that's a more common phenomenon in EMS.
I wonder.
Because I feel that way.
I don't know, because I look at got all these. I've got 15 million people on Facebook that I'm friends with.
Sure.
And I look at it and I go, oh, well, look at what they're doing today. They're not at work. They're doing this.
Yeah.
They're snowboarding or they're out with other medics or friends or not out with medics. They're out with real people.
Yeah.
Normal people.
Yeah.
And it's I just don't have any desire to do that really much anymore.
Social events in a similar way to a shift take a little bit out of me. It doesn't really invigorate me. I get done and I'm like, okay, as long as I got a couple days I can stay at home now, I think I can recover from that social event now.